So this is the meeting of the Policy Committee. We've got several things on the agenda. They're all discussion items. There's no action taken tonight on any one of these items. We'll be talking about a district-wide advocacy and fundraising. We'll be talking about the field trip policy, which I'd like to do first. We'll talk about the liability of employees of the district. And then we will ask for other items for consideration. Hello, hi, Director Engelsman. So we're called to order. And we'll talk first about, sorry, I'm off my agenda. We're going to talk first about field trips, foreign travel, and other off-campus activities. But before we do that, we'll start with introductions. And would you like to start, Chair Wong?
Okay. Eddie Wong, Board Chair, ex officio member of the Policy Committee.
And Michelle DePass, Board Vice Chair.
Hello, Stephanie Engelsman. I'm Zone 6 representative.
Rochelle Chase Miller, Zone 4 representative.
Okay, excellent. So it looks like we have public comment. Do we have people signed up for public comment? Or we signed?
We do.
Okay, fantastic. So for anyone signing up, we would allow you 2 minutes to speak, it goes by really quickly. We'd like to hear your name, and if you could spell your last name for the record. And you've got 2 minutes, and I guess I can time you. That gives everybody time enough to speak. Who is our first public comment?
Would you like me to call one at a time or a couple at a time?
How about a couple at a time?
Okay. We have Mina Shu, Kelly George, and Sakai Yuki.
Testing. Ooh, it works. Okay.
Works very well. Would you like to start?
Sure. Okay. My name is Yuki Sakai. Last name is Sakai. And I'm from Mount Dipper Middle School. 2 minutes?
Yes, please.
Okie dokie. So thank you very much for hearing us today. And I'm excited to hear about this potential change to the field trip policy. I just wanted to address some of the reasons that we have to make this change in the first place. Mount Tabor has been doing research residencies for decades now. And I have been doing them. This will be my 4th year. But I have been carrying the increased burden of having to go through hoops, and we've had to be before you before. Yeah, and we all know what happens. So I'm really excited to hear that there's potential for an alleviation of that burden, because it's really taken a lot of energy from staff and students and families to have this kind of level of uncertainty of, can our program continue to exist the way that it has? And the way that it has existed has been kind of a legacy of international exchange. We are able to take non-Japanese speaking students who are even not ethnically Japanese, but who have been dedicating the majority of their educational career to the study of the language, excuse me, and the culture. And we're able to take them, well, now in 5th and in 8th grade, but 8th grade is a school trip. And so the reason we don't do it in the summer is because it is a school trip. We have them work very hard. And we connect them with schools in Japan. And we have them do a research project. I have no idea how much time I have left. Okay.
I have 1 minute. I set the timer a little bit late.
Ooh, bonus. So yeah, school trip. And we connect them with host families and with schools. And we have these kinds of connections that we foster through a lot of deliberate planning and hard work. The students really work their tails off, and they come back often with a new perspective. Oh, this is why I've been studying Japanese or Mandarin or Vietnamese since I have been in kindergarten.
That's your
That's
time.
a minute? Oh, okay.
That
So
was 2 minutes.
that was 2 minutes.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you too. Mr. Sakai.
Jeez, that is fast.
Would you like to go next?
Okay. 大家好，我的名字是于穗，我的英文名字是 Mina. Hello everybody, my name is Mina and my last name is spelled HSU. Last year I was here to support the Mandarin Immersion Program and keeping teachers at Woodstock Elementary. Today I'm here to support anybody who wants to go on an international field trip. It's important because it's good to have an experience of Mandarin culture and it's good for life skills. Plus, then if you pass this policy, problems won't happen when it's time to organize the trip. This spring, my friend Emmy, who attended Harriet Tubman Middle School, went on her international research trip to Taiwan. Her class did a fundraiser to go to the trip. I bought a sweatshirt they designed. She had a great time and went to the school with Chinese middle school students. Later on, I would like to go on to the international field trip because students work so hard to make our language skills useful. I have classmates who are non-native speakers, but they're learning Mandarin too. All PPS students should be able to go to these trips. And that's the end of my statement. Thank you.
Thank you. You did really well. Thank you. You still have a whole minute left. Can I ask you a question about what you hope to learn on your international trip?
To see if my homeland changed and to learn more culture and see if like other people around the world is as like friendly and kind and learn about them, so then we won't be scared of the unknown, the places that we never been.
Thank you. That's great. That's what we expect to get when we travel internationally. Thank you.
I'm gonna start crying now. That was beautiful. My name is Kelly George, last name George. I've been on the Shuren board for approximately 10 years, and I barely remember a year where we've not been in communication with the school board over the continuation of this unique and extremely sought-over academic experience. In fact, the reason you see so many of us here today, this whole group, from all the Asian language DLI programs is because of this almost annual pilgrimage to this office to defend a long-standing and highly successful academic opportunity for our students. While we have greatly enjoyed getting to know each other over the last several years, we benefit from sharing our organization's practices and challenges. We all have full-time jobs that we do on top of our various board responsibilities. Adding in this almost annual pilgrimage and the planning time that goes into ensuring we can show up as a unified front is time-consuming. The complaint that came back in 2017 has not been reiterated by a single person that we're aware of in the last 8 years, and has not been raised a single time in the prior 15 plus years these research residencies existed before that time, despite these research residencies taking place annually. I feel confident we can all agree this research residency is not a trip, but a capstone educational opportunity that our students work towards for the whole of their academic career leading up to the 8th grade. While we often see it as an incentive to stay in the program through the 8th grade, it ultimately boosts their confidence once they discover their mastery of the target language in country, and we see a large number of students continuing on in their language through high school. By adopting the new field trip policy, we as board members of Shuren, Jinred, Oyanakai, and the VDLI parent program Research Vietnam, we can all better focus on what truly matters, ensuring the well-being of our students, supporting the extensive fundraising efforts that make participation possible for every child regardless of financial circumstances, and empowering the dedicated teachers who bring these enriching experiences to life.
Thank you. You still have 11 seconds left. Oops.
Not anymore.
Never mind. Thank you. Do we have additional? Thank you for your testimonies. It really it helps to hear from the community. Helps us make better decisions.
Thank you for letting us speak.
Do we have additional testimony?
We do. There it is. Sorry, I lost
Okay.
it.
We have. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes, we do. Sorry, I just had lost the
Oh.
tab.
Okay, no worries.
We have Angela Bonilla and Kojo Hakam.
Great. Welcome.
Do I start now or?
Sure. You want to introduce yourself?
Yeah,
Spell your last name, please.
I'm Kojo Hakam, Hakam. I'm the Mandarin teacher, in case you couldn't tell, at Harrison Park Middle School. I've been leading the research residency programs. We started taking students to China prior to COVID. This was started in 2007. And that was back when our program ran through Hosford Middle School. And now we're at Harrison Park Middle School, which is the most diverse school in the district. I'm sure some of you know that. And we're also a Title I school, which is, I think, adds more emphasis to why these residency programs are so important to us. And I want to reiterate what some of the last speakers mentioned, was that every student goes, regardless of their economic background. And last year, out of 23 students, 6 of them got full scholarship payment for this trip.
Excellent.
And I'm going to start tearing. That's why it's so critical, because at our school, many of these kids, this is their only chance to go back to their homeland, and it's such an impactful experience for them. Sorry, I can't talk
Thank you.
anymore.
Oh, it's very moving. I appreciate it.
Hello, my name is Angela Bonilla, Bonilla, and I am switching topics slightly to speak to to some concerns about the proposal from staff to limit this body's oversight of contracting in this district. The SOS audit, the Secretary of State audit in 2019 stated that PPS needs to develop a more transparent budget, publicly report on the results of its investments in student achievement, and detail how its revenues and spending compare to peer districts, and that this district needs to better control increasing employee use of purchasing cards. They recommended that we investigate and report on potential savings areas in depth, including the level of executive administration, use of substitute teachers and educational assistants due to educator absences, health benefits, etc. Since then, PPS has done some great things. We have an internal auditor process. There has been a restriction of the use of purchasing cards. And luckily, there was an update in 2022. However, that audit showed that PPS, quote, has not shown any evidence that the board has discussed detailed benchmarking results or potential savings area in depth with district management. PPS does participate with the Council of Great City Schools benchmarking project, which allows it to compare its operations and performance to other large districts. However, quote, despite these benchmarking efforts, PPS has provided no evidence the work has been used to identify savings areas and address spending challenges. Districts officials state benchmarking is used in internal discussions, but this process is not transparent to the public or to policymakers. I am bringing this up because I know that this information from staff is to align us to other districts. However, what we see in other districts is that urban peers with demographics more comparable to PPS share a lot of that information. This change would be a 66% increase in the amount that contracts can come without oversight by this public body. And I think that's absolutely tone deaf, especially in a year where PPS will be bargaining contracts with 3 labor partners, PAT, PFSP, and SEIU. Please do not increase the threshold for oversight of contracting. Contracting is the first brick of privatization of our public good, public gift that is public education. Thank you.
Hear, hear.
Thank you. Okay, so thank you for providing that testimony, and we're going to go back to the field trip. I would like to hear what your questions are, and I can tell you what some of the things that we might consider are, does the board approve any field trips? Does the board need to redefine the approval process and who approves what? Or does the superintendent define in the administrative directive what level of equity inclusion needs to be stated in the policy? And should the professional conduct policy or student handbook or something specifically referenced? Do we have any questions from our committee members?
So it's okay if I just talk really briefly about,
Please.
since I was the one who started writing this policy. So as you know, I am the one who wrote the first version of this policy, and then I think staff, based on that one, wrote, I think, an even better one, which is the one I would try to push and support. And
Can I ask, are you talking about the one that's fully revised field trip policy 10/19/25? Is that
Yes.
the one? Okay, thank you.
exactly,
Yes.
fully revised field trip policy 10/19/2025. One of the things that we are kind of striving to do is, one of the big problems with this last policy is that it really doesn't follow best practices in terms of policy. The policy in terms of like how the board sets policy, what was defined in best practices is that policies should be setting the direction and defining the goals. And it really is up to staff and, for example, like the administrative directive and underneath to define how to do that. And a good example of that is like you go look at any hospital's policies. Hospital policies are all about ethics. There's a whole lot of legal stuff. But one thing you don't see in hospital policies is how to do hip replacement surgery. And the reason for that is because best practices constantly change. So when you define something in policy that's very stringent and very prescriptive, oftentimes it goes counter to the actual goals of best practices. And what I mean by that is like, just like hip replacement surgery today is way better than it was 10 years ago. I know my mom, sorry, I shouldn't divulge personal, I think I violated HIPAA. Anyways, yeah, it is way better now than it was 10 years ago. And the same thing with this. For example, if we continue with this policy, there's a good chance, because this one requires board approval, requires all these steps to do these things. There's a chance that the field trips that are not fall into this policy, like for example, the in-state close field trips may actually end up being safer than the ones that go on that are defined by this. Second to that, this old policy that I'm going to refer to as the 2019 policy, because that's when it was actually changed and had quite a few things added to it. I forgot, I lost my train of thought. Oh yeah. Totally lost my train of thought. Yeah, so the 2019 policy, I'm just going to say that, was, I don't know how to say this nicely, but we know that the complaint that it came from was targeting the Asian DLI trips. And so the problem it was trying to solve for was how to stop this kind of thing from happening, or you probably, sorry, that's the worst case scenario, probably trying to stop it. But that was his target and that was his goal. And however, it has, the way it's written is so arduous and so burdensome to a lot of administration. I mean, I've talked to principals across the district who absolutely hate this policy. They say it doesn't make anything safer, it just makes things more burdensome. It actually de-incentivizes a lot of field trips because of the administrative work it does. So I think that so that's the reason I proposed a new policy, which strips it down to, again, best practices, stating the goals. Staff, of course, smarter at policies than I am, wrote a better one, and so I am promoting that one. And so that's why we're here today. Hip replacement surgery.
Hip replacement. And so we have about 9 attachments for this item. The one that I also am in favor of is the one that's labeled fully revised field trip policy 10/19/2025. And so the other attachments are the administrative directives. There's 3 of them attached. There's field trips, travel and study programs, and foreign travel - study programs. There's Chair Wong's draft, which he's willing to admit that his isn't as strong. And so I'm curious if you have, what questions you might have about the field trip.
I
am very happy to have this conversation. It sounds like there's a lot of conversation that has to happen, but I am asking that we put this on the next policy committee because when I sat down at about 11 o'clock today, after some meetings in the morning, the attachments ended at Chair Wong draft off-campus activities. And since then, 3 administrative directives were added, and I quickly opened those as best I can. And that after 12 o'clock, no disrespect to anyone who's doing the work, I'm saying I'm not ready because of the time constraints. The fully revised field trip policy 1019-2025 was attached sometime afternoon, and I became unavailable until I walked in here a few minutes late at 12:30. That's not how board members can make proper informed decisions. I want to be able to read everything. I want to be able to understand everything. There's also a staff memo from August of 2024 that I think is really important for all of us to read because the staff in that were pointing to some concerns and issues well before Chair Wong's draft and this new draft that was put in this afternoon. So I think that staff memo also needs to be read by all of us. And I think doing anything today other than chatting, it's not in here. I asked this afternoon after I saw this because I saw legals. Anyway, I had no idea what we were talking about at one point this afternoon, which never feels good when making decisions. And so I would ask that we can just either have conversation today, but that I don't think we're voting on anything. I would hope not, because I literally didn't know what we were talking about until about
Right.
12:30 today.
Yeah, and I was going to respond as well. I was going to just say my hope was that tonight, we've been talking about this for a long time. In fact, we had a first reading on a former draft. I can't remember when that was, but my hope was, and that's because I've heard from the DLI communities that ticket prices are going up. That the administrative burden also from a couple of principals, not all across the district, I'll say 2 principals that find this burdensome, and I was hoping that we could get a whole board discussion on it, move it, and which would still allow you time to look at all of the details, the staff report, and because this is a lot to process. When you don't have time. I also have a full-time job, so I understand that it's very, very difficult sometimes when you get things afternoon. I think people attach as soon as they could today, and I get that. But if we do decide to move it forward, it still gives you enough time by the time it's on the agenda to do some thoughtful consideration.
I absolutely appreciate that. I worry that it is bad practice for us to just move things forward when one of 3 board members is saying, I have not read the materials, I am not prepared. I don't like the idea of having to just use additional time to read what should have been provided in advance of today to be prepared. I want to have this discussion. It sounds like it's a discussion that's been in the making long before I was on the board, long before half of us sitting up here were on the board. But everyone agrees, I hope, that your board members need to have materials in advance of moving them forward. And so while I appreciate that this can go on a work session for longer conversation, or a board meeting, I have also seen very packed agendas and have felt and heard other board members trying to move things along. And so I am reluctant to move this out of policy today. And I would just ask to put this a month from now. If there are tickets that need to be purchased, we can work on something to make sure that your current policy is not affecting the current students. And I would hope in the event that other people aren't prepared and something's on the agenda that also we give some grace and say, we can't just push something through when at least one of the board members hasn't read the majority of things that are attachments. Otherwise, I don't know why they're there.
Well, please
sorry.
go ahead. Go ahead, Chair Wong.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to clarify, the committee doesn't approve anything, it just recommends things come out, right? And so I just want to say that. Number 2, even if we do, let's just say, magically pass this policy tomorrow, right? It doesn't effectively change any of the liability or safety protocols, because I know as a teacher who has done field trips, overnight field trips, multi-day field trips, there's a whole lot of process that goes into it, and it is very thorough and is very, very well vetted. I mean, those practices aren't going to change just because we pass policy. The other thing, I also want to give a real example. I mean, last year, the tickets for the Japanese trip specifically, like I remember it wasn't, because of the delays that the board kind of caused, it was an increase, I don't know, help me out. I think it was like $1,000 per student, 500 per student. When we were talking about how many students? 30? 80? that's a lot of money that parents have to raise to support all the kids, especially the ones that can't afford to go. So, I mean, if we do not move this, I'm pushing to help move this to the full board, because we can continue this discussion as a full board. I mean, there's still 3 others that have not even seen it as well. Because if we wait for the next policy committee, that's potentially another 6-week delay. And we're kind of getting in a time when our teachers want to start looking for tickets. I mean, this has real monetary consequences for delay, and so that's what I'm very concerned about.
Yeah, it would be longer than 6 weeks because our next policy committee meeting is about a month. That's 4 weeks. And then getting it on an agenda could be as early as 3 weeks, and it could be as late as 5 weeks. So we're looking at significant delay. So, and we make decisions on our committee. Eddie doesn't get to vote. Chair Wong does not get to vote, but the 3 of us do. So I'd be interested in hearing if you have any questions that I can maybe answer.
I guess I would ask if you could tell us in your own words, since I haven't had a chance to read it, what the differences are between the fully revised and the current, without not the other documents, but like just your own understanding, because I'm very uncomfortable with this idea that something can be added to the agenda less than 4 hours before the start of a meeting and that we just are moving forward. And it's not like it's an administrative directive. It is the actual policy that we're considering moving to the board. So I would favor having a policy committee meeting in a week so we can readdress this then. I don't want to delay anything, but in my practice as a lawyer, I'm sure in many of your businesses and many of your personal and professional experiences, it is unprofessional to have something that you expect people to understand and vote on with not enough time to review it. And so I don't want to delay it, so let's have a meeting in a week so I can be prepared, or tomorrow, I can be available. But I'm really uncomfortable with the way that this is going forward.
So we have a document that's attached that we could go line by line, and that compares the 2019 policy, the previous policy before that, and then the current one that's on the table, which we're calling version 3. Would that be helpful to go through that?
Director DePass, that one I think there are actually 4 because the request over the weekend was to add the staff version, so that chart doesn't
address
do that. I'm looking around for academic staff to make sure we can work through the field trip mechanics in parallel to the policy making. Usually there's someone here, and I'm sorry there's not, but I do think to the Mount Tabor community and the other person, we should be able to continue to support that effort in real time. And I am not an expert in the mechanics and timing of that, although risk management I work very closely with
and none of us up here are, I don't think, either.
Right, but I think a fairly high degree of confidence that we can get someone from the academic team to make sure that that is moving forward and not delayed, if that's helpful.
Just a question. I really like, Liz Large, your suggestion earlier about like, what if we had the discussion about what is the goals of the policy committee, and then we can answer the question whether this new policy addresses those goals. Would that be helpful?
I appreciate all of this. I'm not trying to hold anything up, but I have not read this new policy. And I read the field trip policy comparison because it was available at 11, but it simply says version 3 from board member. And that was not available until 12 something this afternoon. And so I read it line by line, and I kept thinking, what is this? Is this Chair Wong's version? Is this, apparently it's the new version, which I haven't read. And so every line of this that was available, I have read, but it didn't make any sense because I didn't know what version 3 from the board member was. And so
that would be Chair Wong's version that we have, but it doesn't include, this analysis doesn't include the 10/19/2025.
Or the staff memo that asks for some additional changes that have not been incorporated into things. So there's a lot that's missing from what we understand. And so I'm happy to put this on a work session. I would ask that we appropriate an appropriate amount of time so we can actually talk about it rather than feeling hurried to rush it along, because we don't have a lot of time and we have very packed agendas. And so if we're going to push this to a work session, which is fine, we need to allot a fair amount of time because there's a lot of materials for all of our board members to read and understand. And maybe it'll be fast. I don't know. Maybe we catch up, but I don't want to push behind because suddenly everyone's reading a bunch of versions and has a lot of questions.
I guess I'm not sure why we can't just, I mean, I'm just seeing the newest version since I got here as well, but it seems like we could still talk about it. I mean, we're not voting on it until it's a vote of the full board who hasn't seen it yet.
Correct.
So it seems like we can advance the conversation, discuss what is in the new policy, how it compares to the old. So we're not at least spinning our wheels.
Yeah. So
we
I mean,
would have an opportunity for all of us as a full board to discuss. We would have time to analyze side by side, ask questions if we need to, and literally the move tonight, the action tonight, is just to recommend that our other colleagues, our 3 other colleagues, have time to also look at this, have an opportunity to ask their questions and challenge and interrogate the policy.
yeah. So if
It's like we're not doing anything except for, as a committee, my hope is that we kind of move it forward. And again, it's that forward movement that I'm looking for. It's the forward movement, just not, I don't want to be going backwards. And we've been talking about this for at least a couple of years, I believe.
I mean, there's been a long conversation.
It's
So
been
I think,
like two seasons ago.
I mean, we still have plenty of time. I just want to allay some of the fears, because if you recommend this out of committee, it has to go under 2 readings. So the first meeting, I mean, the earliest best possible scenario would be the October 24th meeting would be the first reading. I don't know if that's possible at this point because of the packed schedule, so maybe not till November 4th. And then it requires a 21-day public comment period. And so it would be the board meeting the month later that would be when we actually vote. So we have 6 weeks before we actually have to decide on it.
It would be a final vote if we go with that schedule on December 2nd. So we would have between today, October 20th, November 20th, December 2nd would be after that 21-day period. So in between the first reading and the second reading, we would have time to comment on it, massage it, interrogate it, and pass it or not.
Thank you. I understand all of that. My concerns today, and it sounds like 2 of us have not fully read it. My concerns today are that we're sitting in a policy committee meeting with materials that have not been read at all or in depth, and we're being asked to put something, like, what is the purpose of us? Why didn't we just put it on the board? Why are we here? Why is this on our agenda meeting if it's just going to be pushed without us reading it? It may as well have just been put on the 24th, and both of you could have put it on there without putting it here. So I guess I'm struggling to understand why it's here if, without reading it, we're going to move it forward.
Sure.
We can put forward my version.
We could. I like that, but I like the other version better. We could amend it to match the version. Again, it's about moving it forward. It's about having communities that put their trust in us, that have been waiting a long time for us to kind of handle this. We should get our materials earlier. We should, and I'm not. I don't ever want to call staff out at all, ever. Haven't done it in 6 years. I won't do it today. Today is unusual. We're down a key staff person, taking a well-deserved break, and yet we still need to move work forward. And if this was super high stakes, I probably would feel I would be concerned also. This isn't that. This isn't high stakes. We have risk management, takes great interest in this topic. There's a student, handbook. There's a parent handbook. There's an admin handbook, administrator. And so a lot of the things that may be of concern would be in the administrative directive. This is a policy that is kind of the what. And we have 3 other board members who are great thinkers, and it gives us an opportunity as a whole. I mean, I guess we would be doing this as a courtesy so we get it in front of the whole board. Or we could put Chair Wong's version forward, which I'd rather not also.
Well, and I will say, I mean, I didn't see it until I got here, and I've read it through once, but having read the other materials, I don't feel like I'm in the dark about what this is. I think that this is a more robust version of what Chair Wong put forward earlier, but it on first read, at least, it doesn't look like anything new. Well, I don't want to say anything new. It's not giving information that like we didn't have before or something like that. I mean, I think that we could still have a conversation about what the new policy is as compared to the old policy, where the differences are.
We could also, to Chair Wong's comment, decide what are we trying to do with the policy? Like, what are we solving for? If we're really clear on that. We
and that
could
would
also
actually
read
be
it all
helpful
together.
for me.
Yeah.
I did, in reviewing the original draft, as well as Chair Wong's draft, and then thinking about the difference between a policy and an administrative directive. I mean, this feels like an in-between of the original policy, which seemed overly prescriptive, and Chair Wong's version, which was more minimalist. This feels like a healthy middle ground, and it would be helpful for me, and probably Director Engelsman also, having not been here for previous years' worth of discussions, to have a better sense of what we are solving for, and what we're seeking to accomplish with this new version, even if we haven't fully read it yet. Like, where are we driving at with this?
Oh,
Do you want
you're
to
asking me a
speak to that?
Sure. One of the issues with so there's multiple issues. I'm just going to list them all off with the old policy. Number one, it doesn't follow best practices for policy. And we know that because of the administrative burden. Number two, requiring the board to approve, I'm just quoting Liz, if you can help me out here. I think having the board approve field trips means that the board, which is 7 probably non-experts on how to do field trips safely, are the ultimate liability, right?
I think the opinion that's been articulated over multiple years from the legal team is that the board approval of individualized field trips, it doesn't mitigate risk. It calls on board members to make individual judgments about very specific attributes of each individual trip, of which it has no additional information than risk management or the senior director or the other approving staff has. So it's an odd dip down and elevation of role, and potentially creates additional exposure for board members in that individualized review and vote with not much. We haven't seen evidence over time that those votes are different, that there's significant deviation, or maybe any deviation, from what's been recommended by and vetted by staff when it comes to the board. The conversation, I think I may have relayed this in August, for a while there was some, and I want to speak on behalf of prior board members, not necessarily disagreement with that. Some did disagree, but some didn't disagree, but wanted the visibility of that, wanted the process as a proxy for review of what's happening, right? So staff has come back and said we could solve that a different way, but at the end of the day, the choice is yours and only yours whether you want to review individual field trips, however defined. You get to decide that. Our recommendation is that you not, but this is not the most important issue in the district.
Yeah, thank you. Like, for example, if we want to analyze equity and field trip distribution across the district, it would be better if we had a district-wide report of all field trips instead of approving piecemeal here and there, because that doesn't really affect, like, for example, if we're looking for equity. So the issue with the previous policy is that it is not solving for the problem it's stating it's solving for. For example, like we always say all the time in equity, it's not about the intent, it's about the impact. And what's happening year after year is that our Asian DLIs are the ones who are going through all the impact. They have to constantly come back and argue over and over to get approved. It causes their airplane tickets to skyrocket. It causes huge administrative burden. And, it's a burden for all, right? And it's kind of like, maybe this analogy goes a little too far, but it's like people saying like, we need to purge the voter rolls to get people who are not supposed to vote not voting. But when it actually was trying to do is get certain people not to vote. And so again, it's not the intent, the intent and the impact are disproportionate. And so part of the reason for wanting to revise this old policy is because the people who are the best at figuring out what is the best for students are our teachers. And second to that, our principals. They're the ones that know what the impact is going to be like in school. If these kids go, how do we mitigate the impact for our students in our schools? Our teachers are the ones that care, are most directly with our students. Our principals can oversee that. And so that's where that problem is best solved. And so the intent of this old policy, again, the board is not the best. We're the furthest removed from the students. So having us trying to solve that problem, it just doesn't make sense. And so again, that's kind of the bottom line, is that when we look at best practices and we look at who are the best people to solve these problems, it's not being solved for in the old policy. Plus, it also doesn't follow best practices for policies.
Plus, we've heard from administrators that it's extremely burdensome and it impacts the Asian language programs disproportionately.
Yeah, now if I can add one more thing really quick, is that if you look at actual safety numbers and stuff like that, it hasn't really changed anything. So if you look at the data before and after, I remember having to prove field trips and stuff like that. It is very arduous. It's very thorough and vetted out. And with this new one, it just adds layers of administration that doesn't actually work to actually improve actual safety of our students.
I see Director Laforte's hand. And she's not a voting member, just for people, but we'd love to hear what you have to say.
Hi, I just have a quick question. So in terms of the purpose, I thought that the issue was not that the DLI programs were having trouble getting their, whether or not their trips would happen and they had to keep coming back and asking to go. It was more of a situation where our process is slowing down their ability to basically book their tickets, and it's costing them more because of it. So I'm just hearing two different things. So I'm trying to understand which one is the case, or is it both?
It's both. It would be both.
And how is this different?
We're trying to solve for the administrative burden. We're trying to make an equitable process that doesn't negatively impact the Asian DLI programs.
How is this
and we're also trying to remain
DLI
true
programs?
to our board responsibilities, which, as parents, we're not educators or administrators. We have neither of that experience. And so this is best practices according to the people that are actually on those trips with our students.
I'm still wondering so my question is still the same. Was the initial issue about the speed at which they were securing their airline tickets and the cost increases, and how did it disproportionately impact our Asian DLI programs versus other DLI programs?
Because these programs actually take an international trip. And
are they the only one that does?
Yes, the Asian language programs are, and so that's why I say it's, these policies are written, with the best of intention. We're trying to address the impact. It disproportionately impacts the people taking these trips that we're talking about.
And I might just add just a little in response to Director Laforte's question. There are some other DLI programs, but they can happen in the summer, which I am not an expert in the ones in Taiwan or elsewhere in Japan, but I understand that the timing of those programs, in order to match to the richness of the program that's offered, that needs to be during the school year and can't be in the summer. And that was a couple years ago in the testimony that happened in front of the committee. So there are some Spanish DLI programs that happen in June at the end of the year, for instance, but it's outside the school year, so some of those other considerations weren't in play, if that's helpful.
Thank you.
So I think to answer your question, so how this has been used in the past before is that there's a line in the 2019 policy that says something like, for example, unless it's, for exceptional cases, it limits a certain number of days that trips can take, and with all effort put in to try to avoid missing school days. The problem is the interpretation for like if a trip actually purposely tried to or intentionally try to avoid as many school days as possible is kind of subjective. And so there have been a lot of like back and forth with board members and other administrators, and back with the teachers saying, oh yeah, you could take these other days. But the fact of the matter is, like, for example, year after year, the Japanese program has this trouble that they need to schedule during a time when school's in session in Japan. So they can't go during spring break, which, that would also be unfair for our teachers to constantly sacrifice their breaks to work. And then, same with in Taiwan and China, they have different school schedules. And, there's an opportunity, the capstone trips, these students actually go attend school in these foreign countries. And so they have to work with their schedules. And what's practically been happening every year is that there's been consistent argument about which, if they actually are taking the best days to go. And then because of that, there's that threat of being not approved. And it has caused, immense increases in costs. The other thing is that with the old policy, if one day, for example, the Department of Risk Management comes ahead and says, hey, we actually have a better way to do this that's more streamlined and safer, they wouldn't be able to do that because this policy is very prescriptive about what process they need to follow. And so this is another example about how, like, when we have an over-prescriptive policy, why it's not considered best practices is because it is very difficult to update. And as we know, like, for example, with all of our out-of-state travel, everyone is different. Another example of why this has caused administrative burden is, like, for example, when like a sports team suddenly qualifies for states or nationals, and they need to get this approved, and the board doesn't meet for another month. And so this creates a really awkward situation, a lot of paperwork to kind of get these approved. I think last year there was the debate team that qualified for somewhere in the East Coast, I can't remember, which is awesome, but it required an emergency meeting of the board to kind of approve it, right? And so it gets in the situation of where, like, why does the board having to approve all these trips, does it actually make things safer? And the answer to that is there's no evidence that it does. Right?
I would argue that we don't necessarily know if that's the case, but it would be impossible to quantify. But I do understand what you're saying in terms of, like, the need to be able to expedite more quickly, having been on the board for a little while now. Why there would be, a desire to speed up the process.
And it's not even a matter of speeding it up. It's a matter of it's not speeding. It's not trying to rush something through. It's to reduce the administrative burden. It's to reduce the burden of having to wait to get approval, having to get put on our agenda, when in fact I don't know. We do know that, or I think we know that it doesn't make students any safer. We could quantify it. We could look at a pre-policy and a post-policy if we wanted to kind of take a backwards look, which I never recommend with this work.
Didn't the Whitehurst case kind of precipitate this policy, the existing policy?
I think that more focused on the professional conduct policy, which definitely has application into field trips. That's the policy that talks about how you vet volunteers, background checks, how you track prior incidents and allegations, and that there's certainly reference to the professional conduct policy in the field trip policy, but the attributes of the policy that came from Whitehurst are really embedded in the professional conduct policy.
So what I'm interpreting, correct me if I'm wrong, is that what the new policy does is move decision-making about specifics to kind of the more local level to rest with administrators and educators versus having those decisions be made by us who don't have the situational awareness of all of the specifics that go into each specific trip and all of the factors therein.
Yes.
Exactly. That's part of the biggest
That's
part.
a great summary.
And I would observe that the staff leading the trip, the building administrator, preparing the trip, the senior director reviewing the trip, and the risk management department reviewing the trip, are doing that work in a compliance, safety focus. There is Kristen Weiler is up here. You can't see her face, but she's the risk management person who reviews the field trips, and they don't get by if they don't meet, if every component isn't checked. So the policy draft that staff prepared, that was added recently, still articulates who has to approve at what level, what building administrators for day trips that aren't in the wilderness, overnight trips, so it's still a policy level sign off in terms of authority, but that staff version does eliminate the board approval, so for your consideration.
Yeah, it looks like single day trips, school principals can approve. Field trips that take place during one school day other than wilderness, multi-day. Risk management and the senior director of schools must approve. Overnight and international, these trips require advanced initial approval from the senior director of schools before completing a detailed trip form for approval by risk management. And then there's a link to planning resources for the timelines, requirements, procedures. And those are all, by the way, on the risk management webpage.
I know I talk too much, but if I can add one thing, it's one thing I really like about this policy, both my version and the better one. Actually, probably better in my version, because I think in a policy, the less you say, the more impact each sentence has. And one thing I really like about this new policy is that it continues to stress the importance of our values. And for example, we want it strives for equity of access, to make sure that there's to strive for no potential barriers based on race, religion, culture, gender, sexual identity, etc., immigration status. It strives to, it states the importance of minimizing the impact of students who are not going on the trip. It states the importance that all trips need to be curriculum supported or experiences that extend their learning. And so again, the less you say, the less words there are, the more impact each sentence. Because when you look at policy, it's the sentences that matter. It's the goals that matter, right? And so having these goals reiterated in a more streamlined policy, I would argue actually makes them stronger, because now we have actually something to hold it against.
So we should probably wrap up the topic so we can move on to our other topics. Oh, sure. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
But yeah, we have a couple more topics after you're done.
And I will note that a lot of this conversation is because I haven't read this in advance. So I will point out, Chair Wong, I appreciate that sometimes less words are better, but in the field trip policies comparison from legal that was put on the materials, your version, for example, the stated priorities for educational values, student safety and well-being, appropriate behavior by all participants, and selecting suitable adult supervision from school staff or community volunteers. Current policy, yes. The version you put in, no. And so perhaps, yes, sometimes less words are better, but in a world where a lot of people are going to be making decisions in the future, it is important that our policies state priorities of educational values, student safety, well-being, appropriate behavior by all participants. That's just one line of this comparison, and this comparison does not include the policy that was added at 12:30 today, which I have not read. Right. I will also say that one of the things that was not included due to time is the August 27th, 2024 staff memo, because I understand, and I'm still trying to wrap my brain around the fact that I think there's another policy out there that's gone through first reading and never got scheduled for second reading, and that first reading had a staff memo that did include adding 10 days to the current policy so that trips could go longer, and then that staff memo had issues, and this was a year ago. And that staff memo worried about the collateral academic impacts on traveling students as well. 10 days off campus could consume up to half of a math unit. It talked about the costs of hiring. I mean, these are hiring substitutes, and we know how important it is to have the teacher in the classroom rather than a substitute for students. So,
but I feel like some of most, maybe all of these are things that would be covered in the administrative directive.
Yeah, and
Maybe I don't.
second, yeah.
I mean, the administrative directive can cover whatever we feel like the
Exactly.
administrative director needs.
It's the how.
needs to cover.
It's
Right.
the how the simplified, the minimalist policy will be operationalized, will be implemented. So
Yeah,
it's spelled out in the administrative directive, not the policy. We want the policy to be somewhat vague and a little bit flexible.
Yeah, and
Yes.
I think, yeah, exactly. If I can respond really quick, the thing about stated priority, or sorry, appropriate behavior by participant stuff. The reason that's not included in is because it's already another policy. We already have a policy for vetting participants and chaperones, etc. So why double policy something? Number two, to
Double
answer
policy something.
those other questions, the current policy is another problem with the current policy is a one size fit all problem. I mean, who are we as a board to tell the teachers or staff or students that 10 days gone is too much or too little when it is the principal's job? So I would actually argue that having those requirements in the policy sends a very loud message to our teachers and principals that we don't trust them, right? That we don't trust them to make the best decisions for our students, because ultimately it's the principal that has to approve these field trips, and then it goes to the area supervisor, et cetera, like that. And so there's a lot of steps. And so when we talk about, for example, let's say a long time ago, maybe there was a case where a teacher that was not part of the DLI program went on the trip. Easy to solve for. Phone call to the principal, say, hey, we don't want this to happen again. And that's all for. It doesn't require a whole new policy just to address this one issue. And so I think to kind of address the concern, yes, I think the answers that you gave are perfect. These are things that are defined in the AD, but I also want to add that whenever we try to do a one size fit all thing, it always backfires for some groups and not more than others, and those groups tend to be, in this situation, a lot of our students of color.
I see Director LaForte's hand up, and then we do need to move on. We need to make a decision whether we move this to the whole board or not.
I'll make it
Hopefully
real
tonight.
quick. I was just going to say, I remember when this policy was changed, because it was in the news. And but the reason that the 10-day number was in there, if memory serves, was because the trip was impacting the students that weren't on the trip, that were because of the co-locating of the programs. So that, I think, is why that number of days is in there.
Well, I'll just say that this is a policy for field trips, not a policy for kids that don't go on the field trip. The policy is written so that the principal can figure out the staffing at the kind of the local level.
Yeah,
I think that's what's in this staff memo that predates me and was written by Dr. Franco and Christine McCloskey and Margaret Calvert. So in that, specifically to Director DeForts, and I was trying to say, in that, the staff memo talks about the kids left behind and the impact on them. I'm fine moving this forward. I do not have the ability to vote today. I am unprepared.
Okay,
And
we're not voting at all. We don't
to
vote.
move it forward, right, to move
Okay.
it forward. But I would like us to all read this former staff memo, because I think it does, all of this is interesting information. Maybe the new policy, which I haven't read, is the best one. Maybe it is, I don't know, but I don't make decisions without information.
But
Makes
we have
sense.
until December to
Second.
fully evaluate the policy and make the decision. I mean, I haven't seen the memo yet, so I have no idea what you're talking about.
Exactly.
But I trust that between now and December 2nd, I'll have the opportunity to review it and integrate
by
it into
side.
my decision making.
And also share all the tons of public testimony that showed that claim about the 10 days impacting the students was actually quite overblown. So
Okay, it sounds like you're okay moving it forward. You're okay moving it forward?
I am not,
Moving
is
it
it
to
either
the.
yes or no? I
It's-
would like to abstain from any decision making to whether to move it forward. I
We're
don't-
just talking in committee about moving the activity basically to the full board. So the full board would consider.
I am very uncomfortable with being asked to make this decision without reading the materials. And I understand everyone's perspective, and I know we've talked about it. We didn't take half an hour to read the materials. We just sort of talked about them. You don't need me to decide whether to move it forward. The two of you can move it forward. I don't
Yeah,
want
I want to honor your input, and also just state that we don't have to be unanimous on it. I'm really interested in moving it forward because I've been here a long time and we've been talking about this for a long time. Every year see the communities that are impacted that are here today, and I'm not trying to rush it, but I'm very interested in moving the work forward, the work of considering the impact of this hybrid, I'll call it hybrid policy. So it sounds like we've made a decision to move it forward. You don't get to vote. But it'll be the three of us. Two of us have decided to move it to the full board. And then if you would, since you're here, calendar that at your earliest convenience. And we will make sure that everybody gets all of the supporting documents. It'll add to our work. This is good. Okay. Thank you.
If I could ask of legal, this comparison document was actually wonderful. So if you can add the current one to this, because I think it was great.
We can, and I want to give Kristen full credit
Yeah,
for
it was
preparing
great.
that summary. So we'll add
Excellent.
the fourth column.
Thank you, Kristen. Okay. We've got our first agenda item kind of off the desk. The second thing we'll talk about tonight is the purchasing and contracting rules. And it looks like we have Emily Courtnage. Thank you for being here after hours. We have a red line draft. We have a staff report, public contracting update, a red line draft, and a copy of the really excellent read, Portland Public Schools Public Contracting Rules. So interesting. Would you introduce yourself? I'm not sure if you probably met everybody, but for the record.
There you go. Emily Courtnage, Director of Purchasing and Contracting.
Excellent. So, you've had time to read the staff report. Do you want to, could you summarize the staff report for us, or
Sure.
Do we want to just jump into questions?
Happy to summarize really quickly if you'd like. So these are changes that I first introduced the policy committee in October 2023, so 2 years ago, as part of a larger package of rule updates. At that point, we were bringing our rules in line with recent legislative changes and making some other administrative improvements and changes. These were asked by a board member who was then the chair of the policy committee to be pulled out and considered separately because they implicated board's oversight or approval. So at that time, these were pulled out with a decision that they would be revisited at a later time. So there is nothing new here that wasn't first introduced 2 years ago. The first change is the raising of the board approval threshold from $150,000 to $250,000. There are several reasons for which we suggest doing so. The first is that the procurement threshold, the formal procurement threshold for an RFP or an ITB, was increased to $250,000 by this board in that 2024 rule change, and that was in alignment with state statute changing accordingly. So having those thresholds identical is easier for staff planning and so forth. So anytime, what that would mean is when a competitive procurement process is required at a $250,000 level, so that's when you would need a publicly advertised request for proposals or a publicly advertised invitation to bid, depending on the kind of contract. The board, those are also the same contracts that the board approves. So we're bringing those thresholds into alignment. The other issue is that $150,000 stems from 2010. And so if we just look at buying power changes since 2010, I ran the CPI calculator, that amount should be now $224,000. So when you keep that threshold the same, essentially you're saying the board every year is looking at lower and lower dollar contracts, essentially. And then finally, we're getting out of step with other local public agencies who have board thresholds at 250 or sometimes much higher. And I've outlined those in the memo with a special focus on local school districts.
Thank you. I appreciated the inclusion of those 11 other entities. I know the city of Portland, I believe, was 250, has been 250 for some time. Metro, I believe, is 250. I don't know what Multnomah County is, but thank you. I appreciate that. So
Sure.
We've got some reasons. We've got some what the motivation is to align with what's in the 2023 legislature's updated Rule 279 A, B, and C.
Yes.
Okay.
So that's the first part. Would you like me to go on to discuss the other parts very
Yes,
briefly?
please.
Okay. So the next part is removing this reporting rule that was put into our rules by the board in, I believe, 2016. I put it there in the memo, where it sort of, it at first limited the contracts from being amended above 125% of original value. We very quickly saw what a problem that was, particularly in the world of construction and services, and especially for small dollar contracts. So you might have, you know, a choreographer coming into a school and they want to add a few more sessions, and you quickly reach that 125% threshold. So in 2019, we went back to the board and said, please relieve us from this burden, because people were having to initiate new contracts instead of just putting simple amendments in place, which is not best practice when the service is ongoing and you know, related. So at that time, the decision was, well, let's just make it a reporting requirement. In reality, and I think I discussed this when I came before the board's work session, but our practice is to bring contracts back to the board anyway when they reach that 25% or 125% threshold. That is our practice. This reporting requirement then is redundant. For our larger contracts, though, because this only applies to contracts that start above $500,000, there aren't that many that exceed the 125% threshold. And so there's been so few, in fact, that we rarely come to the board with a little report that tells you after the fact. And again, that would be an after the fact report anyway. So we haven't found this to be very useful. And if there, you know, if the board has interest in a very specific type of contract, seeing if any reach some threshold, we can pull a report informally at any time. So I guess the final factor here is this, for the most part, we want our public contracting rules to align with the Attorney General model rules and with state statute. There is nothing in state statute or Attorney General model rules that has anything like this. So we would like to pull it out, get in better alignment. And then we finally have two new, very small rules delegating authority to the superintendent. The first is, and we rarely see these, but they do happen, when the contract is above 150,000, so would ordinarily need to come to the board, but is fully paid from fee-based revenues, such as student fees and fundraising. So that could be one of these large trips where we engage an outside contractor to do the trip planning. If it's above 150,000, it's come to the board for approval, but really those aren't district funds. They are in the sense that we collect the fundraising and the student fees into student body funds before those are paid out. But they're not in the sense that you think of most of our contracts.
They're donations and fundraising efforts from
Yes.
families and community members.
Yes, so that's that one. And then finally, we have the offer of judgment rule, bringing that rule into alignment with the board policy on liability claims. And this is really Liz's world, so if you want to speak to that one at all.
I think on two fronts. One, it's just acknowledging over time that those amounts move up with inflation. And second, it aligns it with the approval of settlements that have to come to the board versus not. So an offer of judgment is a little bit of its own unique creature, but it is akin to a settlement. And so having those at commensurate levels, we think makes sense.
Thank you. I have a couple questions. Does anybody have any questions about the public contracting? I was curious if we had any data around what the superintendent's authority. Do we know, like, is that a common for other school districts to have the similar authority?
So are we talking about the 150 versus 250?
Yes. No, on that one I'm clear on the 150 versus
Okay.
250. I do have a question about that. Is that, so you said it might be 224 in today's dollars. Is it tied to the consumer price index, so it would change every year, or?
It isn't. So it's been 150 ever since those rules were adopted in
Okay.
2010.
Then how do we do we want to put something in that says we look at it every 10 years, or does that just happen organically? I won't care in 10 years, so. Hopefully.
We have enough reason to come back to the board with rule rewrites. I mean, we need to update the public contracting rules on average about every 3 to 4 years, 2 to 4 years. Yeah, it depends on what is passed by the legislature. So we can reintroduce that more often if there's appetite for that, or staff can reintroduce that, and the board can decide what their appetite is.
Okay, and my first question, I have to scratch that because I misread. It was the section 3 that calls for newer revised rules delegating authority to the superintendent. I didn't realize, like, right under it, that's the contracts paid from fee-based revenues. My question was about the superintendent, but I don't need to have it answered today.
Okay.
I don't have the question anymore.
Thank you for this. I did read this in advance. I have some questions. So we were at the audit committee meeting. I know that Dr. Adams was unavailable. He sent some answers through and hopes, I believe, to have this to the board. I don't know what date, maybe 10/28 board meeting or work session. Anyway, the point of my question is that as I understand it through my learnings on the audit committee, that there are I think 11 outstanding recommendations out of 20 or so from the contracts audit from the 2020 contracts audit on student-facing services, and that 5 out of those 11, as I understand it, are significant, that need to be addressed regarding personal service contracts. And I suppose I'm just flagging this because I would hope that before we, as a collective board, are deciding on whether to raise a number that frankly has already drawn ire from the community when contracts have been just below it, and there has been some frustration from the community with big new contracts, and the feeling, I think, from the community of not having a transparency in the decision-making of the contracting. And so I would think that if we raise it significantly, the ire is going to grow. So I'm just pointing out that from 2020 that there are still contract audit student-facing recommendations from this audit. I would like those answered. I know that is not on you, but I'm just saying this aloud.
Agreed, yeah.
Yeah, I also have heard, as to the thresholds from the other districts, I was thinking about that because it was in a memo. I think we probably get a lot more attention than some of those other districts because we're so much bigger. We have a lot of media attention. We have a lot of really active community members. We have a lot of really active parents, all of which is great. Media and active parents bring transparency, which is so important in this process. However, to say we should do what they do doesn't really comport to me because they don't have the same kind of scrutiny that we have. And so I think it's important for us to be transparent to our community when we're making contracts, to have it come through the board so people might be able to give public comment, or we might be able to ask questions about why are we doing this or why did this happen. So I do wonder, I would like to see what, say, Los Angeles public schools do with something comparable to cost of living adjustment equivalent, rather than looking at tiny districts. I also, I did make a note to myself, and I appreciate that you sort of gave kind of an answer, but I wonder if you can give additional examples of contracts paid by student fees, like what's being thought about, why we would add that?
So it's been a couple of years since we first drafted that, but my memory was that came up with a student trip, like an overseas trip, whether that was an entire choir going overseas at the time or one of these DLI trips. But there was board questions of why are we looking at this one? Well, this isn't even coming out of our funds. And so that raised the question, and there are not a lot of those that reach that 150 threshold, but they come up periodically.
I don't have any, I don't know if anyone else has further discussion. I think we can decide whether, I don't like moving it up, but I think it's good to have a full board discussion on this, but for all these reasons, I'll just reiterate those when we're in the full board meeting.
Yeah, I agree. I think working for the city, it's been a while since they've raised it to 250. It might even be 10 years. So I used to work in public purchasing. It was not a good fit. It's very, very, there's no creativity in it. It's the way it is. It's the way it's written in Oregon Revised Statutes. And it's, I don't want to say foolproof, but it's very, you've got to follow process steps and thresholds, and it's, again, very prescriptive. So I would be comfortable, moving it forward to the whole board. Sure.
I have a quick question for legal. Can we, as a board, in the future, decide to move some through, like the 25 to 75, and not others? Because I don't necessarily have a problem with raising the. Go ahead, sorry.
Sorry, I interrupted you. Raising the offer of judgment.
Offer of judgment, that's the term, yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
This board can, the committee can make a recommendation of some but not all, and the board can also approve. I mean, usually what happens is instead of voting on each change individually, we'll call out if it's not going to be unanimous across the board, just in the interest of not having many votes that are all the same. But if there is a need to differentiate, we can absolutely do that.
I appreciate that, thank you. I guess then I'll just say why now? In a time where we are collectively as a board trying to establish transparency, trying to stop the hemorrhaging of students and families leaving our school district, trying to bring people back in, I don't know that doing this now is going to do anything other than make people feel like we're trying to slip things by them. And I don't know that it creates a sense of trust. I know someone's going to say that leaving it at 150 is going to make people feel like we don't trust them. I don't know that those two things are not connected. I think we can leave it at 150 for now, let the community see that this board is trying to make decisions that are supporting the district while supporting them and opening transparency and trying to be true to the goals that we have. And in the future, if we are no longer seeing a steady decline because we clearly have unhappy families, as well as lowering birth rates and all the other issues people bring up, maybe we consider doing it then. So I would appreciate moving the offer of judgment forward because I think that makes sense. I don't know that we have a whole host of legal issues settling for less than 25 these days. But I just don't know that it really does anything except send a message to our community that will make them uncomfortable.
Sort of a response, but not quite. So it's kind of separate. I do have a comment on the question. One of the reasons for kind of raising the level of authority to 250 is that, that was something that was determined best practice across the country. And one of the reasons for that is because there's a lot of evidence that shows that when organizations do that, they operate more efficiently and more effectively. And what that kind of leads into my next question, right? Because I have personally a problem between I mean, I'm all for oversight, but the problem is there's a distinct difference between effective oversight and performative oversight. And what I really don't want to do is just performative oversight because we're afraid of 150. We are in a situation where our district is in a skeleton crew. Our central office is operating a skeleton crew. And so when we can look at ways to make things more effective and efficient, that just means that we are freeing up more time and staff to actually help support our schools, right? Which is something that a lot of, let's be honest, in the last 10 years, a lot of schools have reported that they don't feel like they're being supported by a central office. And so to address that problem, one thing we can do is help make things more efficient. And that leads into my next question, my actual question, is that I would also like to second what Director Engelsman said, is like, can we look at some other more comparable districts, like like Boston, Chicago, big, more urban, see what their practices are as well. And then also to provide, and this may not be a question for you, this may be a question for audit. Janice might help with this as well. Janice Hansen, our internal auditor, looking at, for example, past practices of like, when we oversee contracts, which practices have been the most effective in terms of helping to reduce costs, helping to make sure that our money is spent well, versus like, for example, and I have no doubt in the powers of the board, but we're not always experts on every contract that comes before us, and that makes a difference. And I think when we want to look at like how to actually make the money go farther, we do have to have a focus on like what is the outcome we're looking for and what has been proven effective. So I'm willing to have this conversation. I'm still open-minded about it, but I do want to like kind of stress that whole thing about like we need to make our money stretch farther. And if this is a possibility, there's some possibility in here. Yeah, let's talk about it. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm always in favor of getting more data if it's helps us make better decisions. In terms of the 250, I think the reason, again, what are we trying to solve for? We're trying to align that the formal, I can't remember, formal professional services,
procurement.
Personal services.
Yeah, formal procurement threshold. So the threshold at which we have required to have a publicly advertised request for proposals or invitation to bid, and align that with the board approval threshold.
And so those come across the board. I don't know if families are making a decision to send their kindergarten here based on like the board. I mean, I know for myself, leave it to the professionals. I don't think it's a decision-making factor. I think there's a lot of other things that are, but I don't think this is one of them. We can always, I work for government. We can always increase our transparency. That is like the role of every public servant. Again, because you've got the media that wants to shine a light, and then you've got administrators and but yeah, I would be in favor of moving it up. You mentioned something earlier that I do want to touch on, and that's there's personal services contracts, and I believe the 2019 ODE audit did call for a number of recommendations, not all of which have been implemented, but that could, and I believe that work should remain in the audit committee, and remain and be followed up on. And those are things such as our contracts. The board has voted to approve to look at to require an evaluation at the end of the contract year. It doesn't have to be like a yes or no. Do we go forward? It's just are best practices used? Do we see any outcomes? And it's a basic evaluation process. It's not to stop the contract. It's just it's in the spirit of continuous improvement. So I think that's really good work, and I appreciate you bringing it up. And I think it should remain in the audit committee so they can track. But yeah, I'm very supportive of that.
Yeah, I kind of want to echo what Chair Wong and Vice Chair DePass said. I think that transparency is really important in this process, but I think that there are multiple ways that we can get to transparency, because I also think that efficiency is important. I think that sometimes when we get into the contract weeds, we're weighing in on things that are beyond what our purview is or expertise is as board members. I also want to be sensitive to the fact that we are going to be called on to make a lot of decisions this year that aren't going to be popular, and we can't base our decision making on optics or how the community is going to receive it necessarily. For me, my decision making is all about what is in the best interest of kids first, families and teachers following that. And I have worried that as we kind of follow these rabbit holes around contracting, that we're shifting our focus away from stuff that is directly student impacting into things that we don't actually have expertise in, and that is why we hire staff, because they do have that expertise. Our role as the board is to supervise and evaluate the superintendent. Her job is to supervise and evaluate her staff. I think that we can arrive at transparency through perhaps adjusting policy or AD language to request reports or kind of other mechanisms that give both us and the community insight into what is happening in that realm. But I don't think that we need to micromanage it. And I think that it makes a lot of sense to be aligned with what other governmental agencies and school districts are doing. Curious about the data from larger school districts, but also sensitive to the fact that, you know, where 150K went 10 years ago is very different from where it goes now. So what are we really spending our time on? And I'm really, really deeply interested in the 2020 audit stuff. And I think that is the work of the audit committee to be digging into. So I'd like us to pursue that, but via the audit committee versus the policy committee, at least at this point, until it becomes a policy matter.
Sure.
Thank you. I love how you said that. I think, like, for example, and this may also to be Emily Courtnage about, like, for example, the board can always ask for like a report of all contracts above $100,000, right? And we can do like that. We could do that biannually or yearly, right? And that wouldn't be a huge burden, I'm guessing.
Yeah, if you want the basic information about each contract, like, vendor, the description, title, how much money was spent, the start and end dates, who was managing it, that kind of data I can pull in a quick report out of our contract management software very, very quickly. And I'll just add one other thing about the administrative burden, I guess, of producing the board report, because that's what my team does, is it really, in order to do that and get it timely to the board and be able to thoroughly vet those contracts before they go to the board, even though we're going to hold off on signing them till after your approval. That means we need folks to get us those contracts about 3.5 weeks minimum before the board meeting. And then there's this long delay while it just sits and waits. So it does require a lot of advance planning for staff.
I think I remember that on large construction contracts that are, you're vetting, you're looking at their insurance, you're checking their references, you're looking at the construction contractors board, you're doing kind of a due diligence process to make sure that the contract that you're spending money on is with a real firm and they have all the requirements and the paperwork in. I recall doing that.
Yeah. That part is done actually at the point of contract award, before you've even developed the contract documents and negotiating those pieces, and then it comes to my department to put on the board agenda. So there's just a very long runway to get these contracts in place regardless of board approval, and then board approval adds about a 3 to 4 week process.
Okay, so sorry, I'm a little bit lost in the agenda. The decision in front of us again is whether to move this to the full board. It is a yes or no.
That's a quick question.
Yes, of course.
We're moving it, not recommending it, right?
We're moving it.
Okay. So I can agree to move it, but I won't be recommending it. I can disagree with it and still move it for conversation to the full board.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
In the spirit of not thinking we should be making the decision,
Yes,
I think
we're
we
not
should
making
move
a
it, but
decision.
not recommend it. Yeah.
We're just trying to be neutral, and we're trying to move it ahead to our colleagues, and so we have 7 eyes on the work.
Exactly. Just to clarify, oftentimes in policy committee, when you recommend things out of the policy, what you're saying is that this is a discussion that the full board should have. And it's not necessarily saying that you're going to vote for it or
Yeah,
against
I
it.
just want to make sure I was understanding and that it was clear that we're moving, not recommending. And I'm fine with moving it.
Yeah, I think you understood right. There's a lot to learn in this job, and when you just said, I think we're going to be getting these big decisions, I was like, yeah, yep. There's a lot of scrutiny. We're the largest district in Oregon, and you know, the scrutiny is well deserved. So the result, I believe. Yes. And a yes too. Yes. So for further consideration by the full board. It's great that you're here, so we don't have to make a phone call.
I'm also very forgetful, so pester me.
Okay. The last thing we have to discuss is the district-wide advocacy and fundraising, and I want to speak about this a little bit. You'd asked to get it put on the agenda, and I think this is a learning opportunity for me that we should publicly discuss agenda items. Thank you, Emily. We should publicly discuss things that we want to address on the policy committee, and we'll schedule them in around some of that ongoing work about modernizing the language in the policies, but at least if we talk about it at the end of our meetings, it's kind of out in the public. I wanted to, I'd like to, maybe you could talk about why you want to talk about it, and I've got some thoughts too, but this is the district-wide advocacy and fundraising, the current policy.
Yeah, I wanted to say I'm really grateful this is on the agenda for discussion. And thank you, Chair DePass, for adding it. I wanted to say to anyone listening, anyone watching in the future, that as a board member, and I know all of us feel this way, that it's my intention to support board decisions, even if a vote has happened in the past that wasn't one I voted on, even if one happens in the future that I don't individually vote on. I plan to support the board decision because that's the goal. That's best case scenario. And so while I did not vote on this policy, I do intend to support it moving forward. And so anyone who feels disgruntled by it, I want you to reach out because we are listening. I want to work together to see whether we can make this new policy work, because I'm really excited that Jackie Wirtz is joining the fund, that Jackie and the fund are currently looking for school liaisons from every school out there, so not just a few schools. Jackie clearly said it. It's on the fund's website. I've been sending it out to people who are interested, looking for school liaisons for every school so that everyone can hear what's happening and can give reports back to their schools the way that a liaison works. And that also that the fund is looking for individuals, I understand it, to sit on some kind of board and help make decisions that impact all of our students. I want to say we can't be surprised if a new policy that certainly isn't sitting well with everyone doesn't work in the fledgling year, but also that we can't be surprised if a new policy doesn't work if we don't try all together. And so I call collectively on all of our board members. You all have communities out there that you are in touch with to try to rally people, to try to see if we can make this work. Because over time, if we work together, hopefully we can. Right now, it is clearly not working, as referenced by the newspaper articles and the presentation we got. A lot less came in. It is the fledgling year. So my intention is to see whether we can make it work. I hope we can. And to invite everyone to do more than complain or do more than complain about the complainers, to see if we can work together to lift community and make this new process work. And so that's all I wanted to say. I'm glad it's on here, and I wanted to say that.
Thank you for that. I just want to say, yeah, I think that we went through numerous meetings over, I believe, 18 months or so. Lots of community conversation and frankly, a lot of division in the community, which was, you know, I'm down for that. And we just don't need anything else in our community that divides us. We just don't. We need to learn to work together, even with people we disagree with. And I think, if I'm just being honest, I think we could have done a better job of being less divisive. We as a board, and I would say specifically the policy committee, I think could have done deeper engagement. And I know that because that's what I do for work a lot. I do talk to disgruntled, mostly environmentalists these days, but and it's lovely work. And so I think I would encourage people also, all 8 people that are watching, to reach out, because I do want to make it work for everybody. I want to make this work for us, all of our kids. It's why I voted for it. I envisioned a future in which all of our kids had access to these amazing opportunities, especially out of school opportunities that we see some of our higher income schools, participate in. So I'm happy that we're talking about it. I do want to do better, and I want to do better by the community that feels like they weren't heard.
I have one more thing to say. This is all to our legislators out there. I've said this to a few families. Is it not on? It's on.
You might need to be closer.
Oh, be closer. Yeah. I'm usually very loud. I want to note that whether it's 500,000 that was raised or 3 million that was raised, it is a drop in the bucket of an $11 billion budget, which is still not at the quality, the QEM, and is just still a drop in the hat of what we need to fully fund our public school system. So when it comes down to it, the root of this, all of it, and you've said it, and you've said it, and you've said it, and I'm saying it, and you've said it, Ms. Bonilla, the root of this is that we do not properly fund our education, and so we're infighting. And when we start infighting, it means that the decision makers who are not properly funding us are winning. So I'll say that.
Yeah, I want to echo that and throw back to our last board meeting when we discussed outdoor school. What ends up happening is that our community ends up fighting over scraps, whether it is if Fabian is going to get the FTE or Woodlawn is going to get the FTE, or if we're going to have 4 days of outdoor school or 5 days of outdoor school, or whether we're going to have local foundations or a district-wide foundation. But ultimately, that is just us fighting for the scraps, when the reality is that our state has an obligation to fully fund education. We shouldn't be fighting over any of this. We should be focused on the experiences that kids are having in the classroom. We should have reasonable class sizes. We should have clean, functional, healthy, modernized schools, and none of that is too much to ask for. So every time we kind of get into these things, we're getting distracted. So for all 8 people watching, my encouragement is to keep the eyes on the prize, which is fully funded education for all of the students in PPS and all of the students in Oregon.
Way to wrap it up. Do we have anything for the good of the order?
Director DePass, just to confirm that the indemnification policy that was on the agenda will roll to the next meeting? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Due to time. Thank you. And we just skipped over that, didn't we? Yes.
That's all right. It was a full agenda.
We are over time.
Oh, we're stuck with time?
Not stuck, but I want to be respectful of my time
No, I get it.
and other people's time. 4:30 to 6.
I have
And
one quick suggestion. I think it might be interesting. The principal brought this up to me, is looking at our policy for enrollment in terms of when a student's family moves out of the district. And currently, I think the policy says that they can stay within our school. One of the issues that's encountered is that sometimes there's been a couple cases where students have moved so far out of the district that it's actually a burden to kind of continue in our school, and it's actually affecting their attendance. And so looking to add some kind of clause or something where for example, the principal can review their attendance or something like that, that is also part of the consideration. I think that would be something worthwhile looking into.
Would that be for another meeting, to put on the agenda?
Yeah, this is ideas. I think at the end you had
Okay.
ideas for future topics, right? So I think that's one of my ideas.
I used to serve on the East Portland Action Plan, the housing committee, and because of the movement of students that are more in poverty and people that aren't homeowners and poor people and immigrants and refugees, David Douglas actually has a preference policy that preferences students that currently attend their district that are moving even further east. What that does is it provides continuity for kids who are poor or immigrants or refugees. And so it makes me, and someone that moved around a lot, makes me fearful of penalizing someone for being poor. That's it. So I would want to be really careful about what we decide. So at David Douglas, if you move out of the district, guess what? You can still attend the school there. And I think that's particularly for under high school. But you're right. I mean, they do need to get to school. So I think that's a really interesting thing to study, actually. I'm really interested in that. Anybody else?
If this doesn't get talked about now, we have to talk about it next time. Can we just, do we otherwise move this to the board discussion? Would that be what happens next?
No, this is the
indemnification.
liability.
Indemnification.
Yes.
Oh, that's what I meant. I meant
Yes.
Yeah, so if we
Yeah.
don't, would
Liability
we be
of
moving it
employment.
to the,
You can choose to do that if.
I mean, I think
Could we just,
I
for
think we
times?
should move it,
I'm-
given what it says.
I'm gonna do one for the team.
Yep.
Yes,
Okay.
I think that would be fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great, added.
Thank you.
Okay, sorry about that, everyone. So I had this great idea this summer. I was like, I'm going to work on a dyslexia policy. And I was like, I'm going to contact some experts and talk to some students and everything. And then I asked somebody here, and they were like, well, the state has a policy, and ours is way better. And we already had it. So I was like coming in trying to solve something, and it had already been solved. So I had to scratch that off my list of things I wanted to talk about this year. So students moving out of district, we do have one school where we do have a lot of people returning from quite far in Northeast Portland. I'll just say, if you have something in between meetings, make a note to yourself and we'll talk about it in public. Does that sound like a plan? Okay. All right, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.